Hey, how's it going, James? Thanks for coming
Uh,
on.
of course, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm Micah. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, it's good to be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been a fan of your interviews for a while. Kind of starting with the Skype stuff, which is what I'm doing mostly now, and then I guess it was 2 weeks ago. You were there for like media day, just interviewing everybody, Lawler and Askren and all those guys.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it was cool. Yeah, thanks for watching my stuff, man. I appreciate that. It's good to see that it's reaching everyone. So it's good to see. I love hearing that.
yeah, it's great. I feel like there's a new wave of sort of MMA journalists that bring like this positivity and enthusiasm, like you and Robin Black and people that are sort of independently minded. And I don't know, it's really great to watch it, getting away from that sort of corporate stiff kind of questioning style and all that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. I agree. Yeah, no, that's it's just I love doing this, and I'm happy that other people enjoy it, and I'm happy that I'm able to do this for a living. So it's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to get into talking about like details of journalism and how
Anything you want to talk about, man? I'm cool. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want to talk about.
sweet, as well as yeah, we'll have to get into Jorge Masvidal, Darren Till, and all that. And
You bet. Yeah, yeah. Sounds
yeah,
good to me. Yeah, whatever you want to talk about, I'm cool. So yeah, just let me know.
sweet. Yeah. I guess to get started, I guess how did you get going as a journalist? Did you start with writing or video, or what was sort of the impetus?
So yeah, it was kind of with video. I mean, I'm trying to actually remember. Like, I guess the first sort of brush I ever had with being involved in the industry was with Fight Network. I worked there in like ages ago when I first moved to Toronto. I worked there I did an internship there. I was a fan of the sport before that, and growing up and even what I went to school for, I always wanted to be a journalist.
Mhm.
I took I took a communications program at university, and then I took a 2-year broadcast television program at college. So I always wanted to be like an on camera person or whatever. I didn't know that MMA was something I wanted to cover. I think growing up in Canada, I think like most people, I wanted to cover hockey.
Yeah.
And I just, for some reason, when I was in university, I got hooked on the UFC. And it was actually the first season of The Ultimate Fighter that really got me like hooked in. And then I started watching Pride. And then when I worked at Fight Network, it's like I got to like put that into overdrive because I got to cover everything like boxing and pro wrestling and MMA as well. And basically when I started at Fight Network, this is like way back in like 2008. That's basically where it started. And then I sort of worked in the television industry for years, and it wasn't until about 2000 and I'd say probably about 2011, 2012, I started freelancing. Because after I left Fight Network, I still wanted to be involved in combat sports, whether it was writing or doing anything else. So the first site I ever actually freelanced for, believe it or not, was TSN. And I was working at TSN at the time as an editor. And they asked me, I know you're a big MMA fan. We need someone to kind of contribute content. So I was just writing columns, basically, every week for TSN for free. But at least I was, getting on a huge platform and, getting my name out there. And I actually, the first event I ever covered was actually UFC 165, which was Jones and Gustafson.
Oh, yeah.
Which was great because at the time, TSN was, still is, one of the biggest networks in Canada. So they just assumed because I was like with them that like I was like a big deal, which I wasn't at the time. But I got like a cage side seat to go watch this fight, so that was awesome. So that's where it started, and I continued to freelance. And then when I in my day job when I switched companies, because I used to work at I went from TSN, then I worked at Discovery Channel, and then I switched companies to work for Rogers. I couldn't freelance for TSN anymore because it was the rival companies, so there was like a huge conflict of interest there. So anyways, long story short, I ended up going to a different company, freelancing there, and then it led to me getting on with MMA Oddsbreaker, and that's where my video interviews started because I wanted to be do broadcasting, and so they were cool enough to let me do video interviews, and that's where it started. And then it just spawned into me working for other sites, and then I eventually, I think it was 2017, late 2017, I quit my day job and started doing this full time. I just, I work for a bunch of different websites, providing them content. And I am pretty sure I'm the only person in the industry right now that is doing just mainly video and getting paid for it, like with as a freelancer. Most people, they either work for one site. For me, I work for multiple sites, and I make it work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, the independent kind of spirit and setup that you got going. I think that's the wave of the future. I mean, people that have their own sort of vision and goals, and like we realize with technology and the connections we have, we can really pursue those. But
I was going to say, yeah, just to interrupt you there, you know, I think versatility is important. Like, I was lucky because I had an editing background. I have, you know, a background in how to do all that stuff. Like, I see a lot of people, the stumbling block is, I don't know how to, you know, shoot video or edit video, or I don't know how to, you know, do interviews. So it's like the fact that I was able to do everything, I kind of created my own job. And, you know, I see a lot more people now doing video interviews, but at the time I was seeing a lot of people doing podcasts, and I'm like, that's great, but like, not everyone has time to sit down and listen to like an hour-long podcast. So for me, I did the interview short, they're video, it's quick and easy, and it seemed to sort of catch on, and it's sort of been my own thing. So
yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. I didn't know you started freelance basically 2017. I think that's when I started watching, because that was like right when like Sean O'Malley was kind of coming in. Was it? Or that was
yeah, probably. I think O'Malley got signed. He won a Contender Series. I believe that was 2017. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So going back, I'll switch topics a little bit. You're talking about,
of course, whatever.
Starting with Ultimate Fighter 1, getting hooked on that. How about Diego Sanchez? Like, still, I mean, just doing great. Like, that was incredible to watch.
It was. I actually picked Diego Sanchez in that fight, and it wasn't out of like, you know, being a fan of his. It was that I actually couldn't believe that Mickey Gall was was a favorite in the fight, only having I think 6 professional fights heading into the matchup. And yeah, Diego's had some miles on him, but come on, that experience has got to count for something. And of course, you know, he looked like, you know, vintage Diego, getting a really impressive performance there over Mickey Gall. I don't know what this guy's doing. He's talking about anti-aging. I'm starting to believe it because he's actually looking really well. So yeah, that was awesome, and it's so cool. Like for me, like I get to interview this guy now, and I remember watching him on season 1, and just it's so cool. Like that's been such a cool thing for me, is to see him still in the sport. Like you think about that cast and the people who, you know, when they retired and things like that, like he's still plugging away. So good for him.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch. And speaking of the experience versus youth thing, we always hype up the youth in sports, which is great because it's, you know, they're the wave of the future. But you see it in fighting. I mean, you saw it with Darren Till coming against Jorge Masvidal, and not only is Masvidal an old dog with all the tricks, he did new tricks in that fight. The switch stances. I mean, throwing the right hand from orthodox and then like pulling it halfway just so he could step into southpaw to throw that overhand left. That was brilliant. And I've watched Masvidal for a long time, and seeing him do things I've never seen him do, it's like some of these older guys are kind of revolutionizing the sport, I feel like, whether it's Diego with longevity or Masvidal using new techniques and stuff that you haven't seen much of. It's fascinating to see.
But how about to beat Darren Till at his own game? I mean, that was the most impressive thing to me, was that he actually went out there and, you know, handed Till his first knockout loss. I thought that was incredible, you know, because clearly he'd have an edge on the ground as well, but he decided to, you know, stand and trade in this fight. I think that it's just, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, I think a lot of people overlook Masvidal, including myself. I mean, I thought the size would be a factor. I thought that the layoff would be a factor. The layoff, if anything, I think made Masvidal better. It made him go back to the drawing board and you know, reevaluate and, you know, switch things up. And it paid off. I mean, he got a huge win, and, you know, now he's right back in the driver's seat. I mean, people forget. No one is talking about the fact that Masvidal lost two straight fights heading into this one, because it doesn't matter. He just got this huge win. People, you know, MMA is a sport where it's all about, you know, how are you doing now? And right now he's the man.
Yeah, everyone always says you're only as good as your last fight, and it's like, in the eyes of the public, that's really what it is. And I sense too with I think Kamaru Usman was saying some stuff about Colby today on Twitter. I can't remember exactly what, but I get the sense he dislikes him so much he doesn't even want to give him the shine of that fight. Like, I don't think he's nervous about fighting him.
To be honest, selfishly, I'm a little disappointed, to be honest, because I think Colby, you know, as much as people dislike him, they can't discredit the fact that he did beat Rafael dos Anjos. He was the interim champion. I don't know, like, I mean, I guess officially he's not anymore, but they got to do that fight. Here's the thing with Colby, like Colby just needs that fight, and then if he loses, then people can, you know, the whole shtick's over. I mean, it's going to be a tough sell if he's coming off a loss trying to act the way he's been acting. But they got to do the fight. I mean, I think the UFC made a big mistake not booking the Woodley fight initially, because now Woodley, like, that whole rivalry is pretty much gone. They may never fight now. And I think, you know, obviously Masvidal, you know, Ali Abdelaziz, Kamaru's manager, was hinting at him next. But I don't know. I think they still got to do Colby. They had that situation at the Palms. You know, use that footage, sell the fight, get me interested. That's what I think we're missing a lot of times when it comes to these fights. There's no storylines. Like, I remember watching the UFC when they would bring guys in the cage after the fight. I miss that. I want to see some anticipation leading up to a fight. Right now, it's just too we're basing it off of Twitter trash talk and stuff. I want to see real build up to a fight. So I hope that fight does end up happening. But I mean, we'll see what they decide to do there, because there's a few options there as far as what's happening at welterweight.
Yeah, for sure. The Twitter beefs are always strange because, I mean, you never know when someone's serious and when they're just trolling. But that's why I think everyone, well, it seems like almost everyone was supportive of Masvidal going after Leon Edwards. And because I guess, Edwards is talking trash on Twitter or from a distance and everything. And Masvidal's like, well, we're fighters. I do want to fight you. I don't know. That was a crazy scene, though.
Yeah, see, I have mixed feelings about that. So on the one hand, I'm, and I've always felt this way. I think that, if you're a fighter, you should keep it in the cage. You shouldn't do, like the whole Khabib jumping off the cage, the whole McGregor throwing the dolly. That stuff doesn't look good on the sport. I realize they're fighters and people are like, how can you say that? Can't you expect, I get all that, but I still think there's got to be some professionalism there. But on the flip side, like, it was in the back. It's not like there was like a crowd of people around. He's popping off.
Yeah.
Masvidal's just coming off this win. Edwards is interrupting his interview. At that point, it is a little bit street, I guess. So, this is a guy who's doing backyard, fights. I mean, you can't say that to a guy like that and not expect to get whacked. So, yeah, I mean, again, mixed feelings. I thought it was kind of cool, but part of me is also like, a little bit unprofessional.
Yeah, for sure you don't want anything to happen outside the cage. But as far as the outside of the cage incidents we've seen lately, whether it was Verdum throwing a boomerang at Colby or like you said, Khabib or Conor, this was the most mild one, because even before he threw the punch, you notice Edwards puts his guard up, so he's expecting something. Not to say it's good that Masvidal just throws a punch, but as he said...
No, I agree. I mean, if we're talking levels of how this is like bad, like Khabib is probably like number one, because actually, I mean, McGregor's probably number one, although there weren't any like fans involved, so the fighters are involved. But McGregor, Khabib up there, and then you have the Leon Edwards thing like down here. It's not as bad, but still. I mean, it's, it kind of sets a bad precedent. Like, let's say this happened at the Fighter Hotel. That would be worse because there's people around, right? Like, at least here it's in the arena. There's, security officials, all this stuff. People are around. So it's a little bit different. But, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I'm not a fighter. So for me, it's like I've talked to a couple guys trying to, like, get insight into the mentality and how that really works for them. And I know that a lot of it's a different mindset than a guy like me operates under.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But, getting back a little bit to journalism, because I'm kind of, there's a bit of the sort of martial arts MMA journalism scene that seems, I don't know, a little dirty. Like, and I even noticed today you were tweeting out that people are plagiarizing your work. It's like, it's not great to see that.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, you just come to expect that in this industry. Plagiarism was a bigger problem, I think, in MMA, years ago. The site I work for now, BJ Penn, years ago, this is long before I ever got there and long before they've really sort of reestablished their reputation, but there was a guy there that used to run the site that used to constantly plagiarize content and not source, and it's a big issue. And I think the sourcing has come a long way now, because people say, oh, it's like, who cares? It's just like people don't have time to go check the sources. Well, first off, yes, you do. It takes 2 seconds to search like a fight booking on Twitter to see who broke it. And 2, that's how people make their names for themselves. People like Nolan King, people like Chris Taylor, Farah Hanoun, Marcel Dorff. These are people that, go out there and really, kind of risk themselves as well to break some news, because if you're wrong, the fans are the first people to come after you. So to me, it's a tough job with not a lot of upside, in the sense that if you're wrong, then, you're ruined. But if you're right, then obviously it's good. But there's still that risk that something could fall apart. I myself have had news that, I had from solid sources that was good to go, and it, didn't materialize. And then on the flip side, I've had news that was 100% true, and I got it out there. So, to answer that question, I think that I think it's getting better in MMA, but unfortunately, it's just something we have to come to expect. It happens in the industry. Yeah,
definitely always going to happen. But at least it's good people are noticing, and there's enough.
Well, Twitter, you can't get away with it. I mean, that you see the mob sort of come out, and in this case, it's like a good mob, like someone stealing, because basically, for those who didn't see it this morning, I did an interview last week with Dan Lambert, Colby Covington's manager, also the man who runs American Top Team. And we were talking some pro wrestling, and I guess a pro wrestling site say that they had heard something, but they were referencing my interview, but they didn't source it. It takes 2 seconds to source. It's like, don't be that guy who's like trying to be like, I know everything. It's like, no, you got it from somewhere else. Just source the link. You don't even have to embed the video. Just source the link. We're good. That's it.
Yeah, for sure. You got to keep those ethics up, because people are going to stop reading your stuff if they know, you're just stealing.
You're stealing, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because it shows you don't really even know what you're talking about. You're just finding people who do and kind of taking their livelihood a bit.
And on the flip side, something that I actually do encounter fairly often is I'll have people steal like clips from my interviews and use them on their own channel and then monetize it. And it's like, you're making money off me. Like that. Like I literally had to email someone and be like, look, dude, like, and he's like, oh, well, I linked back to your stuff. And I'm like, that's not the point. You're still stealing my content. Like I took the time and the effort to actually book the interview, shoot it, edit, put it together, promote it, all that. And now you're taking views away. Like that sucks. You know, that's not cool, man. So, you know, at the very least, like I would rather someone ask for permission. At least then I'd be a little bit more lenient. But actually going out there and stealing footage, like there's so many YouTube channels that do it. It's super annoying. And because I'm not a big enough channel, I don't have that thing on YouTube where it just searches all the videos and it automatically demonetizes. I have to manually do it, so it's a pain in the ass.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because someone sent me a message saying one of my interviews got stolen, and I looked it up. It was like this 30-minute documentary, and one of our guests said like one line on it, and I was like, no, that's probably under fair use. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah. No, exactly.
That's nothing. Yeah. But yeah, people are always trying to find stuff. And it's actually funny, after that episode got like 250 views like immediately. So I was like, actually, that's a good thing. Like,
yeah,
I'm okay
no,
with
it helps.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had situations where people just flat out upload, like I do these pros picks videos, which do quite well. I mean, they're probably the highest rated videos on my channel, and I had someone like literally go and just directly upload the exact same thing, and it's like, come on, man, like you know how long those take to put together? Because usually what I'll do is I'll interview a fighter and I'll ask them about a bunch of fights, cut up all the predictions, and then put it together into one video when that fight comes about. So yeah, I mean, like for someone to go and just steal that and then make money off it, because they do well. They're easy, to digest as far as the content. So of course people are going to watch it. So yeah, that's just super annoying.
Yeah, I mean, those are great because you get a bunch of expert opinions in a short amount of time. It's to the point. You get to see all your favorite fighters. And that was one of the things that impressed me at first seeing your stuff, was like, how does he get everybody? Like, you have everybody on the channel. And it's like, if you want to hear what, a dozen of the top fighters think about an upcoming card, it's like, go to your channel, and that's where it's at. Like, nobody else has that. And you talk about the editing skills. My little brother's actually a filmmaker, so it's inspiring, like, me to want to try to, once I start getting more guests and like pick up some steam, if that happens, try to do something more like that, because like I do appreciate those short clips. It's especially searching through YouTube, you can click on one and then the next, and eventually you end up actually watching a long time, but you know what you're getting. You don't have to wade through like a long video.
Yeah, and to be honest, I got that idea ages ago when I worked at Fight Network. I mean, I remember one of the first things we would do is when we would go on like shoots. I remember the first like shoot we went on. I was sort of an intern at the time, like behind the scenes, but I remember us interviewing Michael Bisping at a seminar, and I remember at the end of the interview they're like, hey, can we just get your thoughts on some upcoming fights? And then it was the same thing basically. I mean, the only difference I did is I gave it a name. I called it Pros Picks, which I think is very like sort of to the point. But I'm noticing other sites starting to do that now. Bloody Elbow just did one recently called Fighters Pick Fights, and it's the exact same thing I'm doing. I do know the guy who put it together. He actually reached out to me. See, that I appreciate. That's professionalism right there. He's like, hey, just so you know, we're doing this. Is that cool? And I said, yeah, of course it's fine. Like, I don't expect people to like not do something similar. Like MMA Junkie does one as well called Who You Got, which I think is a terrible name. And they do it like while they actually go to the event, they'll do it and ask the fighter like at the event, which I think like the fighter doesn't want to talk about fights then. Like they want to talk about themselves. But that's aside the point. So yeah, I mean, other people are going to do it. I don't want people stealing the name or worse, stealing my content. That's even worse.
Yeah, for sure, because, I mean, you're definitely a trendsetter with that, and I know more people are going to try to do something similar, but I think your fan base is starting to build up and understand, like, you're the OG with it, like, and the fighters.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I definitely think I've done more video interviews than anyone, like, and that includes Ariel, like, just because, I mean, especially now that I'm doing it full time, I do a lot of interviews for a lot of different websites, and not just UFC. Like I'll do regional, and I'll do all types of interviews with prospects and stuff. So I mean, and because I don't do long interviews, I'm able to do more interviews. So I think that I think if you look at sort of I wasn't the first one to do the split screen video interviews in MMA. I mean, you could look at like Karen Bryan or Frank Trigg. They did them well before I did, but I think I was the one who sort of was all about getting as much content as you can. I've sort of done kept that sort of what is it? Sort of that streak up of doing, just a ton of interviews.
Yeah. How does it work? I mean, how did you start scheduling with all those guys? So it's just kind of get a few and then they know
whenever
each other?
I can. Literally before I got on with you, I was texting some people. Kind of the way I do it is usually at the beginning of the week, I'll go through sort of all the major cards and I'll pick out, sort of the fighters I think I can get, the fighters I'll try and get. I'll be reasonable. There's certain fighters I know that I can't get, or I'll just like it's just impossible. Just because there's certain ones where it's like you can't get them. I'll kind of weigh my options, kind of figure out who's a good interview, who isn't, and then look obviously at, and then from there I figure out who I want to use for what outlet. Like, because I work for different websites, some outlets want specific content, other outlets, it's like I have to sort of spread the wealth. So if I get, like last week I got Fightful Dan Lambert, which was an exclusive and a pretty good interview. So maybe I'll get Sherdog a better interview, to sort of counteract that. So I try and balance it. It's tough. I mean, I have these conversations all the time with my outlets, like, oh, I noticed you gave such and such this interview. It's like, yeah, because I got to balance it. Like, until someone wants to pay me the big bucks and hire me full time, then this is how it's got to have to be. I have to balance things.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's like political donors, like companies, they donate to both sides. They're like, we got to spread it out.
You got it.
Yeah, I got to be diplomatic.
And and as far as, and I get asked this question a lot. And I don't know if you'll ask me it or not, but a lot of people ask, how do I get my interviews? It's a lot of things. It's I've had the benefit of, because I interviewed so many prospects. A lot of those prospects are in the UFC now, so I've already had their contact information, like before. Other times it's just knowing the right managers, knowing the right PR people. There's a couple agencies that manage a ton of fighters. Like Iridium's a good example. They manage just like a ton of UFC and Bellator fighters. So I usually go to them. Actually, they'll usually pitch me and say, hey, this is who we have available. This is who's fighting. So I'll usually go from there. And then the other way is really just social media, like Instagram. Believe it or not, I get a lot of my interviews on there, just actually, DMing them and just saying, hey, are you free for an interview? And some of them will be very good. Some of them I've never heard from and probably never will hear from. They never check that request box in their DMs. But hey, it's worth a shot.
Yeah, no, I can attest Instagram is where I've gotten the majority of. I mean, I've only done, I think this is episode 16, and we've had a lot of repeat guests. We probably only had like 9 or 10 guests, but Instagram is definitely the way to go. I don't know, it's one of the more friendly social media sites, at least in my experience. Like Twitter's
I feel like Instagram's not as threatening because, like, people, I mean, I know a lot of people, and even myself, like I'll post like family photos and stuff, but still I feel like Instagram's a little bit more lax, whereas I feel like Facebook's a little bit more guarded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm not a big fan of Facebook.
I'm kind of getting away from it. I mean, I mainly just post my interviews on there, but the days of me posting all my photos, like that's what Instagram's for. It's sort of surpassed it. It's just an easier thing to use, and I think people are kind of annoyed with how Facebook is, keeps changing everything all the time. Although the Facebook Messenger is very good, but that's about the only good thing about them.
Yeah, that's all I use as well. That does work well. But moving forward, I'm wondering, like, which kind of fights and cards are like really standing out to you right now, and which fights specifically you think are going to get made, especially looking at welterweight is so all over the map. I don't know, like who's going to fight who? Like what are they going to do, you think?
Yeah, so well, I'll answer your first question. Like fights that I'm looking forward to, Edson Barbosa, Justin Gaethje, which is coming up next weekend. Looking forward to that. I actually am intrigued by this Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Anthony Pettis fight this weekend, just to see how Pettis looks at 170. Like maybe he will surprise us and do quite well. I'm going to give my take on this. To be honest, I think, Wonderboy's favored for a reason. He's still a high level fighter. He has a win over Jorge Masvidal, like we talked about there.
Pretty dominant win too.
Exactly. Yeah. And people forget that, they talk about him being boring. It's like, I don't recall that fight against Masvidal being very boring, but people have short memories. Other fights. I'm just trying to think here. Let me get because there's so much to absorb here in this brain of mine. Yeah. What do we got coming up here? Let me just look at my guest list coming up. I mean, I like the Eric Anders and Khalil Roundtree fight that's coming up at 236. I mean, all those fights on 236. Poirier, Holloway, Adesanya, Gaslam. Those are awesome fights. The Eric Anders, Khalil Roundtree fight at 205 is good. Looking forward to kind of flipping promotions. I like the Rory McDonald John Fitch fight. Can Rory come back here? John Fitch is he's known as a wrestler, as a grinder. Can he grind out Rory McDonald? That's a big question. So that's something to think about as well. And then fights to get made. I mean, Usman Colby for me. I'd like to see Askren fight Masvidal. I know people think I'm crazy. Everyone's so adamant about this rematch with Robbie Lawler, and I get it with the ref stoppage and everything. But to me, I think the UFC wasted an opportunity with Askren fighting Lawler in the first place because there's no buildup. You have a guy who's a great self-promoter in Ben Askren, and you're giving him the guy who hates doing interviews. It's like, why would you do that? Like, to build up the fight. Yeah, intriguing, like, fight-wise, it's a great matchup. But, to me, there's just no buildup. And so, you need to take advantage of this because people, when, like, I saw the numbers when I covered 235, like, Askren beat everyone by, like, a country mile. People are invested in him. So I think this stoppage, if anything, was telling the MMA gods that, like, look, you shouldn't have done this fight. Let's give Askren someone that's going to talk some trash. Masvidal, I think, makes sense. I mean, they might go him in Edwards, but I think you got to give Askren, whoever his next opponent, it doesn't matter who it is, it's got to be someone who can talk trash. Like, I don't want to see him fight Wonderboy. That would be a boring build-up. Wonderboy's going to say, oh, you know, he's super nice, whatever, and I love Wonderboy, but, you know, it's just they need to give him someone that's going to really talk a lot of trash and make it worthwhile, because it's so rare in the UFC especially to see a self-promoting fighter like a Ben Askren. So that's one as well. And I'm trying to think any more. I'd like to see Cormier and Brock just for the freak show aspect of it, but you know, who knows what'll happen there. So that's sort of like another wishful thinking, as well as you know, I'm looking forward to Thiago Santos and John Jones. That looks like it's going to happen next.
Yeah, Thiago Santos in sort of the mainstream flies under the radar, but he's literally the most prolific KO artist like in the UFC. I mean, I don't know how many knockouts it is in the last few years, but I mean the numbers, it's just off the charts. And he's got a couple losses. I mean, he lost to Gegard Mousasi, but he hasn't lost to anybody bad. Like, Santos is, I mean, he's so fun to watch, too.
Well, there is that one blemish, and I mean, to be honest, that was probably you know, a wake-up call for him because it helped him move to 205. But the loss to David Branch, I think, was one where it's like that. He probably would have liked that one back. But you know what? You know, he looks great at 205. I think a lot of these guys are really, you know, making the move up there and really having success. Like, I'm curious to see Luke Rockhold. I think Luke Rockhold might be better at 205 because he doesn't have to cut as much weight. You know, there's a lot of fighters that I think would pay dividends competing at 205. But yeah, Santos has been on a kill, and he's just he's great to watch. I mean, never in a boring fight.
Yeah, and yeah, that guy, I think he deserves a little bit of the shine and deserves the title shot because like he puts on amazing fights. He fights top opponents time and time again. He fights a few times a year. It's like those guys. And it's good. Dana White's kind of looking at those guys, like whether it's him or Anthony Smith. It's like who's actually pushing up, you know, the leaderboard, like to get the title fight, like who's really gunning for it, and he's just giving it to him, and that's what Jones seems to want right now too. I like that because that division was a bit stale, well, just not moving around. I mean, at the top few people have been great. I mean, since the inception of the division, but for a little while, like the top 10, we're like, well, what are these guys really doing? But now you got Dominic Reyes, and Thiago Santos, and Anthony Smith, and it's just like, I don't know. Johnny Walker, of course. If that guy can calm down just a little bit, I feel like he could be a champion.
Well, see, I have a different opinion of Johnny Walker, and I do love him, and I think he's been amazing, and I think the run he's on has been incredible. But I see a lot of people like just ignoring the body of work that a lot of these other fighters have done in the division and putting Walker in that conversation. And look, Walker's been great for the guys he's fought, A+ performances. But I mean, Misha Cirkunov, Justin Ledet, these aren't like top guys. So I'd like to see. I would like to see Walker fight like an OSP next. Like if OSP gets past Krylov in the rematch. You know, give him that because that's the type of fights he should be getting, like established veterans. Like for him to fight Dom Reyes, I think Dom Reyes is undefeated. Dom Reyes just, you know, I know it wasn't a great fight, but he took out the number 6 guy. Like that's got to count for something. Like Volkan Ozdemir and Misha Cirkunov to me are like miles apart. So I would like to see, you know, Walker get, you know, a few more fights and then we can talk about title stuff. Because like for now, I think it's just like slow down. He's 3-0 in the UFC. That's it. It's not nothing crazy.
No, I agree. I think it's probably 3 more fights. That would make sense. You know, first you got to give him maybe a guy top 20, and then try top 15, top 10. Just do it the real way. Climb up the ladder, which it seems to be. I think Dana White was even saying that. It's like, we can't rush him. We gotta, because these other guys are, you know, they're competing against the best guys and winning. But
and how about building up prospects too? Like you have Reyes, who, you know, it seems like he might be fighting Corey Anderson next. They were sort of teasing that fight. You know, I think it was yesterday. Which, you know, talking about title shots, like Corey Anderson, like I know he's complaining about not getting a title shot, but it's like you got to finish fights. Like that's why Thiago Santos is getting the title shot, not him. It's because he's going out there and you know, finishing guys, and that's the reality of the sport. They want finishes. If you're going to a decision, you're going to be like Rafael Assunção, where you know you're just not getting that shot because you just keep, you know, it keeps you behind a little bit. So yeah, I think there's a lot of I think Reyes and Walker are the sort of the 2 guys right now you build that division around as they, you know, give John Jones these guys to, you know, keep beating.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think even seeing that with Till, maybe he got pushed a little quick.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, but it's you know, it's hard. Hindsight's 2020 because, you know, he did finish Cerrone in the first round, so it's like at the time. But yeah, clearly it was too much of a step up. And I think that, to be honest, the UFC underestimated Masvidal. I think they thought the size, like a lot of other people, that was going to be the difference. But realistically, Till should have got, you know, a bit of a bounce back. But if anything, maybe this is a wake up call for him to go to 85. I think that might be a better weight class for him.
Yeah. The thing with the size with Masvidal is, like, people forget when he was fighting Ray in Kimbo's backyard, that was a way bigger dude. He's been used to that his whole life. That doesn't bother him. He's totally comfortable being the small guy, being the fast guy. But, I mean, what he did that impressed me so much is he took a lot of Tyron Woodley's footwork, and he even did the back up against the cage, so he could slip and rip and draw him in. But he kept so incredibly active off the fence, throwing multiple punches, and then he'd follow up with the body kicks. It's like, yeah, you can't sleep on Masvidal, man. Like that's a guy I've liked for a long time. I forget the first fight I saw of his. Oh, who's that wrestler? His brother fights too. He's got a pretty big head. He beat Condit one time. I can't think of his name. Pat something, I think.
Pat Healy?
Yeah, Pat Healy. There we go.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him in that fight, and Healy's like a grinder, just pushing him against the fence. And Masvidal was totally comfortable getting his back against the fence with the takedowns. And yeah, it's just a different level of composure that you don't get without an incredible amount of experience, it would seem. I mean, Anderson Silva does it too. Like, he'll back himself up to the fence. He's like, yeah. Like, on the streets, people talk about that. Like, get something behind you, and you're good. And I don't know, that's a strange thing because it makes the guy come to you. And, like, you want him to come to you, especially if you're a guy like Silva or Masvidal. It's like you want that forward pressure because you're gonna unload on them and take their momentum.
Yeah, no, it's
with
true.
A punch.
Yeah, great game plan. I think that's another thing that can't be underestimated. He's an American Top Team guy. They really come to, they definitely come in prepared. So, and we saw that on Saturday.
Yeah. Speaking of American Top Team, let's get back to that Gaethje Poirier fight. I know I jump all over. There's just
no, it's
so
all good.
much
Jump away, man. I'm right with you.
Hell yeah. Poirier's a guy. It's crazy. Like, the first fights I watched that kind of got me into the sport was like Nate and Cowboy. I guess it would have been Brock, Frank Mir. Was that 2? It might have been 2. I can't remember what that card. I think it was GSP, Thiago Alves, and then like a big fight 2 was Poirier and Holloway, and no one had heard of Holloway, and it was just incredible. Even in that fight, he was like a skinny kid, and he didn't win, but like his enthusiasm, like he's throwing jump knees and just like going wild as a 21-year-old. Like, that was, I don't know, there was something there you could see from the start, that level of energy. And you see it with a guy like Sean O'Malley, where they're so happy and energetic when they're in the cage. It's a different breed. But yeah, what do you think about that fight, that matchup?
I can't wait for that matchup. It's so like, I mean, how do you call that one? Like, Barbosa. What's so interesting to me is that like Barbosa is such a curious case. He gets absolutely demolished in 2 straight fights. Khabib and then Kevin Lee. And then he does that exact same thing to Dan Hooker. It's like that never, ever, ever happens in MMA. So it's like, is Barbosa back? I mean, we have to assume he is after the last performance. Like you said, you're only as good as your last fight. Yeah. And he's got the killer kicks, and it just but Gaethje's got good kicks too, and Gaethje has good power, and Gaethje will stand and trade, and Gaethje's tough to finish. Like, there's just so many question marks heading into this fight. And I think I don't know. Like, to me, it's a tough fight to call because really, we've seen Barbosa get finished, we've seen Gaethje get finished, but they're both tough to finish. But they both strike, so it's like I don't know. Like, it's just a crazy matchup. This definitely, it could be fight of the year. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of times fight gets pumped up, and then it's like, well, we pumped it up so much, and it wasn't what we thought it would be. That one. The only thing that'll keep it from being a crazy war is if someone gets clipped early. I mean, those guys just don't know any other strategy than throw as hard as I can. And I mean, them along with Cowboy, those are probably 2 of the best low kickers in the game too. It'll be interesting to see how that matches up, if they're going to trade low kicks or if Gaethje will go for that clinch to low kick. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder what the game plan is. Like I said, both have really good camps too. Like, American Top Team for Barbosa, and then Gaethje's at Genesis. But I know they also like cross train with Elevation. I was talking actually, who was I talking to the other day? I think it was Brandon Gertz, and they were mentioning how they go to Elevation as well, and there they have like Drew Dober, Neil Magny, and Curtis Blades, and Overeem's there now too. So just think of all the different training partners they get to train with as well, which I think is a big advantage. And Trevor Whitman's his coach, which is one of the best in the game. Yeah, just so many cool things heading into this fight about that one.
Yeah, that one's tough because I like both of those guys a lot. That happens with a lot of fights nowadays because they really are matching up the best guys. It's like, as a fan, it's fun, but it's also like, I don't want to see anyone get KO'd a lot of the time. I feel bad. I'm like, oh man, it's rough. But I mean, yeah, they sign up for it and they love it. That's just a different level of human.
It is, yeah, and I think I think it just shows how rich the lightweight division is right now, that you're able to make fights like this. Like, the fact we're getting, in the span of like a month, not a calendar month, but you were going to get Gaethje and Barbosa and Holloway and Poirier. Like, what?
I know.
Like, that's like a fantasy. That's like a UFC 3 tournament or something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, and after they did Anderson Silva Stylebender, like they're really putting together the fights that everybody wants to see, and they're delivering.
Yeah, no, it's true. So we're definitely in for a treat, and I think what better way to do this with the fact that they're really going hard on ESPN. I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, ESPN's crushing it. I think that was a good move, and they the broadcasts have been pretty incredible in my opinion.
Well, they're getting to that next level, right? And I think that's what they've tried to always do, always move forward. And I think Fox was a good place to start, and ESPN sort of the next level to that. And we've seen I don't think the broadcasts have been like incredibly different, but they've certainly addressed the issue with the fight times going too late. The pacing's been a little bit better. They've really just I don't know. I've been very impressed with it so far.
Yeah, the pacing was big. They pushed that, which is I think important.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So, it's someone. I mean, since I moved, I used to live on the East Coast, eastern side of Canada. So it was a little bit tougher to stay up and watch fights, especially being like a dad. But now being on the West Coast, the 3-hour time difference makes such a difference. Like I love it. I'm done, fight cards at a certain time, like 10 o'clock, and it's I can go and still do stuff at night after the card's over. It's great.
Yeah, it's funny. I was in. I'm in the East Coast right now. I'm in Philly, but I live in Virginia. But I was in LA and. For Jones Gustafson too, and show up to a bar just to try to catch the fight, and it's like early, and I'm like, there's probably a couple fights on, and like they're just announcing them walking in, and I don't know, it was like 8:30 or something crazy, like it's super early. I'm like, man, people are drinking already, like this is too early for me to even go out. Like it's wild, but it's super nice.
Yeah, it's way more convenient. I'm in favor of, and just like we had the London card last week, which is in the morning. Like I am in favor of more like stuff during the day, just because then you have the night to do other stuff, which is always a plus. Yeah,
for sure. Because I'd have to like DVR and then like wait, and then it's like 2 a.m. You finish the main event live or something. It's like, all right, this is ridiculous.
It's too much. Yeah.
Yeah. But I know you probably got to get going in a few minutes. Are you still good for a couple more questions, or I can let you go either way?
Yeah. No, let's do a couple more. I probably got about 10 more minutes. So.
All right, sweet. Yeah, I guess I'm really curious. I don't know. I guess I've just become such a big fan of martial arts. I just really like it to the point where I'd love to go to events and get to talk to fighters, do the interviews and stuff. I'm trying to I'm inspired by what you did, like seeing the path and what you can do. I don't know, maybe if you have any pointers or advice or things for someone like me or any independent person that's kind of trying to get where you're at.
I do, and actually, I'm probably going to start releasing like videos like on my channel of like stuff that I would recommend, and not that like I'm an expert by any means, but I've certainly learned a few things over the years of stuff to do. So I think the biggest thing that I always tell people when they're first getting started is figure out what you like doing, and don't be afraid to try everything. So I would recommend if you're starting out, first off, you got to learn how to write. I think that's important no matter what. That's your foundation. I mean, most jobs, if you ever want to get hired. And people say it's not about the money. Well, it does become the money when you're doing this all the time. And even if you do have a day job, you'll want to get paid to do this eventually, because no one likes working for free forever. So learn how to write. Find people that you enjoy, like writing, or people whose content you enjoy, and try and model yourself after them. Don't copy them, but try and see what they're doing that you think is working, and don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, a lot of these people that are in the industry, they have Twitter accounts, they're on social media. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I think oftentimes a lot of people try and do this on their own, but I think it's important to get mentors or get people that are willing to look over your work and have a look and things like that. So I'd say like I said, learn how to write, and then also like hone in on what you like doing. Like for me early on, it was always about doing interviews. So I knew early on I wanted to learn how to get better, and there's certain people that I sort of model my interview style after. So that was something that was important. And once you figure that out, I'd say don't just cover the UFC. I see a lot of people doing like, here's my UFC London recap. It's like, no one's going to watch that because there's like a million other UFC London recaps out there. Like, why are they going to watch your show over Ariel Helwani's? They're not. So I think that's important too. Like, do a bit of UFC. It's important. I mean, the prelim fighters can always use more love, but I would say start focusing on regional MMA, women's MMA. Most people live somewhere that's close to where they're doing, regular MMA events. Go cover events. I highly recommend that. You get a really sort of eye-opening experience of what the regional MMA scene is like, and sometimes you get to interview fighters that end up going on to becoming, bigger things. So it's good to get those early interviews, saying that, you interview these, people early on. Like a good example I always bring up is Eric Anders. Like I interviewed him, I think his second or third pro fight. And I thought it was interesting because here's a guy who won an NCAA championship with Alabama, and he's an MMA now. And I thought this is a cool story. And I interviewed him right up until you know, like every fight, I think, basically leading up to him going to LFA, to him winning the middleweight title, him getting signed to the UFC, and then, you know, getting to meet him last year in person, you know, at UFC 231, and doing like an interview with him in person was awesome too. So I think you can't underestimate, you know, regional MMA, and also think long term. I mean, I see a lot of journalists, you know, really like you said, it's easy to get a hold of fighters on Instagram and stuff, but I think there's an importance of getting lesser known fighters and building those long term relationships, because guess what? When they get big, they'll go to you first because they remember that you were with them since the beginning. You know, I see a lot of people not really building relationships, just, you know, happening to get like a big interview, and then they run with it. And also you're inexperienced. Like, do you want, you know, like a big name fighter to interview and you're not ready for it yet? You might, you know, people might see that interview and, you know, write you off completely. So I think it's important to sort of, build that foundation, build the long-term relationships. And the other thing I recommend, sort of as my last point, is, you know, just be consistent. Like, even as something as simple as just put out one piece of content every week. Don't miss a week. I never missed a week. I actually, when I used to do The Parting Shot, which is the podcast I do now, the video podcast, it used to just be an audio podcast. For the first 3 years we did it, we didn't miss a single week. And what I would do is, if I was away or something, I would just, you know, do like a pre-recorded episode, or I do like a best of episode. But I have content out every week, because I think that's where, you know, I hear so many times where people are like, yeah, you know, they do as much as they can at the beginning and then they just fade away. There's lots of people that do that. So I think being consistent, just doing it one day a week, pick a night of the week, you know, Thursday, Friday, whatever, weekend, doesn't matter. Get something out there. And then lastly, I'll say is, like, once you start building up a portfolio, like, I'd recommend making your own site, or making your own YouTube channel, or making your own, you know, blog. Like, there's like Medium sites and things like that. Then start pitching some of the sites that'll be willing to host your content, and you might not get paid for it, but at least you have a platform. So like an MMA Sucker or a Cage Side Press, start with them, pitch it to them, say, hey, look, I got a bunch of content here. Would you guys be interested in it? They're likely not going to pay you, but that way, once you get the content on there, then you build up your content even more, and then you can start pitching, you know, Bloody Elbow or Sherdog or Fansided or whoever, and then you can start working for them. I've seen so many people do that, and I think that's really the best solution. So those are sort of some tips that I would recommend if you're starting out, to just, you know, be open-minded. And another thing too, don't ever turn down an interview. Like, I see, I'll tell this story here quickly too. Years ago, I had someone message me and be like, hey, I have this female fighter, you know, she's you know, starting out or whatever, but sounds like she's gonna be trying out for the Ultimate Fighter. Do you want to interview her? And I was like, sure. Did the interview. That was Randa Marcos. Now Randa, you know, she's been sort of a staple in the UFC for years. She's got a fight coming up here soon, but Randa doesn't do a lot of interviews anymore, but she'll do them with me, because again, I was one of the first people to ever, you know, get her on like a radar, and vice versa. It was one of the, you know, early interviews for me. So just don't feel like you're too big for anything. Like, I still interview like amateur fighters, or like fighters that are like 1-0 now, and and then, you know, 2 weeks ago I'm interviewing John Jones. So I think you can never lose sight of that. Always just treat every interview the same. Have positive outlook, positive attitude, and just and then sort of last thing is just you know, try and be positive all around. Like on social media, I'm sure there's times you want to, you know, cuss out someone or an interview canceled. Just leave that negative stuff off. Just keep it professional and move forward. Yeah,
man, that's a lot of great advice. I really appreciate that, and appreciate all your time, and appreciate everything that you're putting out. It's great to see. I mean, because you walk the walk, you put the positivity out, and you talk to everybody, and it's great. But it's cool. Some of the stuff you're saying, Chase Hooper, who won on Dana White's Contender Series, he's been on the show twice, and he's going to come on after his fight for Island Fights this Friday. So it's cool.
Yeah,
like
there's another example. People. Yeah, like just someone who like I knew he was on Contender, and I think Contender Series is a great place to start too if you want to interview fighters, because like they get on the UFC like on Contender Series and people watch, but no one knows a lot about them usually, and in a lot of cases. So it's good to get those interviews early in, and then usually they're the guys that go to the UFC next. So it's good to establish that early relationship.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'll let you get going, man. I really appreciate the time. This was a great learning experience for me. I really appreciate all your insight and knowledge.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Hal. Anytime you want me on, you let me know. Just shoot me a message. And, everyone can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. And, appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Awesome. One more thing. When I write an article, can I send it your way?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, you bet. So, and anything you want, just let me know. Just, like I said, my DMs are always open. I'm a busy guy, but I'll definitely get back to you. So
awesome, man. All right.
All right, man. Have a good day. Thanks again.
You too. Thank you.
Appreciate it.